So Chainsaw Man chapter 232 comes out tomorrow, which is March 24th. And I was just reflecting on the entirety of part 2. So when that chapter releases, I more than likely will make a video talking about part 2 overall entirely. However, I started thinking about, should manga be read weekly? And I want to look at this from the lens of Chainsaw Man Part 2, which I have read weekly, starting at, I believe the Falling Devil arc was when I had caught up to the manga. So I haven't been like a day oneer. And then Jujutsu Kaisen, which I also caught up to chapter, I think it was 238. So again, I was not like a day oneer for either of these. I caught up to them midway through arcs that were, were very hype, had a lot of things going on. And I've had a interesting experience within these two fandoms, but they've been totally different. So this kind of prompted the question in my head that said, should manga be read weekly or should we wait and binge it? And I have mixed views on it. I think the spoiler alert, the too long not gonna watch this, which you should watch this anyway, and like and subscribe and comment, of course, is, I think it depends on the series and on the person. Wow. I know, a very shocking revelation, right? I want to put this into the context of both of these series because they both are very different reading experiences for me. So I'll start with Chainsaw Man Part 2 as kind of like the why you should not read manga weekly. And I have a little bit of other context for this one because my friend Kino read all of Part 2, binged it to catch up to the previous chapter. So she was catching up to 231 because I told her this is ending soon, you should catch up. So she binged the entirety of Part 2 and had a way different experience with Part 2 than I had, which is again why this whole question is in my mind, like, why should we be reading manga weekly or not? So I'm going to start with Chainsaw Man Part 2. So for me, and again, I'm going to make an entire video about Part 2 when it actually wraps up. This is kind of just like a very brief, this is supposed to be a short video, which will probably end up being like 20 minutes because I am a professional yapper, especially when I get deep into my thoughts. But Part 2 for me, as someone who read it weekly starting at the Falling Devil arc, was very sporadic. So the weekly experience reading Chainsaw Man Part 2 was that it felt like a lot of things happened, but that also a lot of things didn't happen. I want to explain that. So a good example for this is the breaking into the public safety warehouse of devils arc. So I forget what chapter it is. So I'm terrible with numbers. So it's the chapter where your own family pull up to the public safety detention center for devils. The chapter ends with, it's gonna take a war to break Denji out. So I'm like totally hyped. Like, this is gonna be so fucking exciting. There's gonna be a ton of stuff that happens. What's gonna happen? A big old cliffhanger. And then 3-4 chapters later, it's over. Reading that, I remember thinking, what was the point to everything we just did? And this is not the first time that has happened in Part 2 for Chainsaw Man for me. It happened in the Falling Devil arc. It happened in even the most recent chapters, like 225 during the Yoru Denji battle where they go to hell and it's only for like 2 panels and the panel ends on them being in hell. And then the next chapter later, they're back in the human world. So there's a lot of experiences like that reading the Chainsaw Man Part 2 weekly, where it was like you had this huge cliffhanger and then the next chapter would drop and it just seemed like it was all for nothing because the story just kind of like, okay, we're done with this. Like I go back to the detention center arc because that's the one that makes me like the craziest thinking about, because like I understand the point of that arc was for Asa to find out that Denji is in fact Chainsaw Man, but it feels like it could have been done in a different way and one that was more impactful. And it brought back Kwanzi for a whole like 5 panels and then she kicks the shit out of everyone and then comes up to Denji and is like, oh, I'm not gonna mess with this one. Here, I'll pretend to lose, and I'm actually much stronger than all of you put together, but I'm gonna pretend to lose because I want you guys to escape. So I've had very mixed feelings on Part 2. Felt very sporadic and disjointed. Like I said, things happen and it doesn't seem to make any sense. And maybe that was the experience reading Part 1 weekly, because I binged all of Part 1 like in a weekend. So going through Part 1, everything felt like it had a place. There was a very obvious climax it was going towards. For Part 2, it just hasn't felt that way. And I know I keep saying it, but I don't know if Chainsaw Man is meant to be read weekly, because I know Fujimoto is like this like this grand concoctor and schemer. I just don't think his manga's made for being read weekly. And why I think that is because when she read part 2 all in one go, she did not have the same reaction that I had, where I said it feels really disjointed and sporadic, and like there's a lot of plot things that are happening without getting any type of resolution, and it just seems all very random. She did not have that exact like experience. Hers was, she felt that the pacing was good, everything made sense, it flowed into it. So reading Chainsaw Man makes me think that reading manga weekly is not the answer. I'm still gonna read it weekly because I'm already in too deep for it, and I'm someone who I don't like to wait, even though like reading manga chapters is like 10 seconds of my life every week, like the most hype 12 seconds of my life. So I'm still gonna do it, but Chainsaw Man is one of those that makes me think that manga is not meant to be read weekly. And it might even, I think Fujimoto would be better if he didn't have a weekly release. And I know that he doesn't always do weekly releases. He's fallen on to bi-weekly quite frequently within part 2. But even then, I think he would be a better writer if he had like a month to drop 2 or 3 chapters. I think it would be better. And I say that Chainsaw Man should be not read weekly versus Jujutsu Kaisen, which the only way to have read Jujutsu Kaisen was weekly, is because I had the exact inverse like experience with Jujutsu Kaisen, where I binge read it. It felt long binge reading it, and I want to make a Jujutsu Kaisen video, but I'll spoil it a little bit and say that I think Jujutsu Kaisen is like incredibly mid, but I like Jujutsu Kaisen a lot. It's like one of my favorite series, and I binged it up through the Calling Games and up through the Gojo Sukuna fight at the end of that. And I would say is that when I was reading Jujutsu Kaisen, there was a lot of arcs where I was like, can we just get this over? Because like Shibuya, Hidden Inventory, and the Star Plasma Vessel arc are all incredible and were awesome to binge, because again, it felt like there was a lot of things that were happening, but they all were going towards the same like climax. There was nothing that didn't feel like it was worthless or useless. And then I got to the Calling Games arc, and it's walls of text, and it's boring as shit. And there's a bunch of jobbers. The best part of the Culling Games is the Higuruma Yuji fight, because Higuruma's the GOAT, and I love him. The Hikari Kashimo fight, and then Sendai Colony, which is like, sounds like a lot, but when you read it, there's more than 3 battles that are going on. And the other worst part is that it's just boring. They spend so many chapters just talking about like people's curse technique that we're never gonna see again. Like, I think of the manga artist guy, like, yeah, he showed up at the end, but did we really need like 12 panels talking about his curse technique? I don't care, I'm never gonna see him again. And then even talking about Hikari's technique, because that was also a slog to read. Jujutsu Kaisen is the manga that is like the penultimate reading weekly, because the community was so awesome. And I want to make a video about how I miss Lobotomy Kaisen that I came into. Jujutsu Kaisen is one of those that if you weren't reading it weekly, you missed out on like the best fandom, community, and engagement I've ever been in. There is no community like the Jujutsu Kaisen, Lobotomy Kaisen community, and it's really a shame, because it made reading it weekly worth it. Staying up for the leaks, reading the leaks, the comments and the memes were what made that worth it. So Jujutsu Kaisen is one of those that I think is designed to be read weekly, because it's so bombastic and there's so many things happening, especially in that last arc, where its longevity and its ability to like remain popular really did come from the fan community. So you can see where I'm kind of torn with this question of should manga be read weekly, because I was also reading Katagami weekly, and then that got canceled. And I thought Katagami, I thought it was off to a good start. I was enjoying it. There was a clear escalation happening, and then it got canceled. That's probably one that I wouldn't have picked up had I not started reading it weekly. And it's too bad, because it fell victim to the curse of weekly manga not being popular enough to stay around. I think Hunter x Hunter is going to be one of the ones that you need to binge once all of whatever Togashi is doing is done, because there's just so much to read. I just can't imagine that one being enjoyable weekly. There's just so much. There's so much text in it. I like, it's not that I hate text and I hate reading. I like reading. It's just that for manga, to me, if you have text on text on text, then I could just go read a book or a light novel at that point, which is a lot of the same. But I'm just wondering, and I want to know in the comments what everybody thinks about if manga should be read weekly or not. If the weekly release schedule is worth it, it's valuable. And I know from like a labor perspective, it's not worth it because this is why mangakas get burnt out really quickly. I'm not like, get rid of all of the industry stuff. I'm not thinking about that. The working conditions in Japan are horrible for mangaka. That is, you cannot change my opinion on that one. I'm wondering purely from a reading experience if it is worth it to have weekly releases or if they should be monthly. So leave your opinions in the comments below.